know and teach the rules and the stake and the outcome. We'll break that down into 10 steps of implementation. And one of the steps is how to open the books and teach the numbers. And then we do a dollar exercise. So we'll literally teach people how, and this is what we do when we coach companies. It's when we, at our own companies, everything, right? And this is, we got 100 coaches worldwide. The whole thing is, it works everywhere in every kind of business or organization, not for profit, for profit, government, school, healthcare, whatever. It works because money is the universal language. We will actually coach people in this fashion. And this is what we'll do in the course. We'll do exercises like this every single week live so that you can ask questions, adapt it versus adopt it, and make it right for you. So imagine pulling your people together and saying, well, what are the different buckets of revenue that we have? So at the Great Game of Business, we do our annual conference, we do courses like this, we sell books and products. You kind of get the feeling. For you, it might be, hey, we're a service provider and we have different districts. We have different service lines. Maybe you're writing code and it's like web development, UX, different things. You know what those are because it's your company. So we plot those down and we'd say, here are the revenue items. And then we'd say, well, those are promises to customers that we want to deliver. So there's costs associated with that. Those are COGS. We have to teach people that because they probably haven't learned that from anyone else. And for an engineering firm, it might be billable hours or efficiency or something like this. For a manufacturer, it might be direct labor. For a construction company, it might be materials and rework and scrap and all that sort of thing. We can take revenue minus COGS and teach them about gross margin if it's a percent and gross profit if it's dollars. Hell, I could walk into anybody's organization today and ask them, hey, I'll give you $100 if you can tell me the difference between revenue, margin, profit, and cash. And frankly, I'd probably still have the $100. We got to teach them this because they haven't learned it elsewhere. Next, now this, remember, this is very simple. Every number is represented, not every number is detailed. This is where it gets interesting. That gross number could look pretty good. Our margins could be nice and healthy, but we're not done spending money yet, are we? Nope, we have expenses. And so here's an important point. We don't share salary information except as an aggregated number. So you can list those things down, boom, boom, boom. Pretty soon what you start to see is it's really a map of the organization. And it tells you what you need to know about getting line item ownership, like who's responsible for the lights, who's responsible for the IT, for insurance, right? Who's responsible for operations, who's responsible for sales. All these things can be plotted on here. And we're talking about aggregated numbers so that everything is represented. I'm going to use net profit as an example because I want to end with a story that is pretty powerful. And that is, look, if we take $1, guys, and we use an example of we make 10 cents on the dollar. By the time we're all done, let's just pretend we make 10 cents on the dollar. What we can now teach is that to get $1 of profit on the bottom line, we need to sell 10 at the top. Now, at SRC and remanufacturing, we're so capital intensive, we only make a nickel on the dollar, so our number is 20. The reason this is important is we're always going to beat up sales for more sales, and we're going to teach them about how they create a great company with us. Now, everybody else in the organization, usually it's a lot more people in the COGS and expenses lines, we can actually help them identify where they live. See this new column here? This is what Brother Luca forgot 500 years ago when he created the first income statement that we use today. He forgot a column for someone's name. So now I can actually go to like the freight guy that you saw in the video. You know, he was kind of a cantankerous sold poop, wasn't he? Well, I can actually say, well, you said that the freight line was going to change if the sales lines change. Of course it will. All the lines will change because everything starts with a credible top line. The fabulous part was he owned it, didn't he? He knew his number and he knew what it would have to be if things changed. Well, now I can go in and say, if we can save $1 in freight or $1 in cost somewhere in here, or maybe we can change our IT services, whatever it is, those dollars drop right to the bottom line. So they don't become dimes. In reality, everybody that owns a line item has the power, in this example, of 10. When Daniel says you can 10x your business, this is how you 10x your people's engagement, because all of a sudden it's like, what I do matters. No one ever told me. Think about that janitor. If these were their numbers, his 7,000 would be worth 70 grand. Isn't it wonderful? I love that because now they can talk about something different when they go home, when they go to the bar, when they hang out with their friends. It's a whole different feeling of impact. And the way to wrap this whole thing up is to talk about, I'm in Texas, so I thought I'd tell a Texas story. We've worked with HEB for years. They're big, they're beautiful. They are just wonderful in the grocery industry. Now they make 2 cents on the dollar. That's the industry, right? And at 34 billion in revenue to deliver, they've got to have 140,000 people. They hired us to come in and do. This is a picture of one of the events that we did. We did a rock show for them before COVID, town to town, region to region, training them just on things like what we're talking about today with that dollar exercise. What's powerful is people were picking things up we didn't even realize they were learning. So here's the story. I hear from a regional manager about 3 trainings in. He was going out into the field. He went to one of his stores. In fact, I remember San Antonio store 36. He was in the produce department when a young man a frontline worker who had been to the training, he asked, how was the training? What did you learn? And the kid interrupts his regional manager, his boss's boss's boss, to step across the aisle and pick up a loose grape from the floor. And honestly, when the regional told me the story, I was a little taken aback because he was sort of like, I didn't know if it was disrespect that he interrupted me or what, but I'm like, tell me more about the grape. He says, well, you might think it's because we're trying to keep the store clean. That's true. But what we learned at the training was the average slip and fall settles for $5,000 at HEB. At 2 cent profitability, we would have to sell $50 to get $1. That means we would have to sell $250,000 to cover the $5,000 slip and fall. That's why I picked up the grape. Now, ladies and gentlemen, let me tell you, that is a powerful story for me because it wasn't the only story. Guess what I did? I then got permission to take him and have him tell his story in front of 600 or 800 of his people in the next 3 trainings. It was awesome. And for SRC, it's been amazing. We went from 119 people to today we're about 800 million. You can see we're the smallest of the divisions, and we've had joint ventures with some of the biggest OEMs on the planet, people like Navistar and John Deere and Case New Holland. The reality is we've spun off 69 companies since 1983 when we started, most of which have been run by former frontline employees. So to really put a point on this concept, it's about building a great company, isn't it? The company is the product. Well, if you put $1,000 in your 401k back in 1983, today we're talking about getting you a return of $48,000 from the markets. If you were really smart, you'd give it to Warren Buffett. He'd give you $400,000. But if you were crazy enough to be at SRC in 1983 and believe that ordinary people can learn business and they can think and act and feel more like you do as business leaders, every $1,000 at SRC today is worth $9 million. Now, folks, I got to tell you, this is exciting stuff to me because it has changed my life. It's absolutely changed my life. I am passionate about it. You can probably tell, but it is powerful because we're seeing it in every sector all around the world. And I'm thrilled to be with the Growth Institute because we're reaching so many more people on the international scale. It's worth teaching, it's worth learning, it's worth sharing, because the more you teach your people, the better your company will become and the bigger the value of your business.